Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Talon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximise our unique blend. The show's been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com.
But if you watch the news daily or several times a day, like a lot of people do, it pops up on your mobile phone. It's in adverts on channels which are not the main channels. There's death, destruction, unrest, things to make you anxious which you can't do anything about. Now, when you cannot do anything about a situation that you are flooding your neurology with, which is creating an emotional response that's negative on your neurology and your body, your system, that makes you feel disempowered, helpless and hopeless. And the helpless, hopeless, worthless trap is one of the most difficult traps to get out of in terms of your inner psychological conversations.
Today I'm joined by the wonderful Nikki Emerton, who has quite the backstory. She suffered a hell of a lot until she started to understand what was going on in her brain with her thought patterns and overthinking. That has led her to a wonderful career working as a coach, training people in therapy. She helps people with their trauma, with their digestion issues, confidence, limiting beliefs, anxiety and depression, all of that stuff. So I thought she was a wonderful person to talk to about our overthinking tendencies right here in the creative industry. It's a classic trap. Those of us who are sensitive and empathetic and love to use our humanity and our skills to create often fall into overthinking traps. So let's get into that big one. Without further ado, this is the Creative Condition. How are you doing, guys? My name is Ben Talon. I am the Creative Condition founder, host of the Creative Condition podcast, artist, writer and coach. I work with people coaching creativity. You can find out about all that stuff at thecreativecondition.com/coach if you want to work with me one-to-one. Other than that, there is a hell of a lot of resources over at the website, including the reading list. 300 plus episodes of this show created and curated to help you enhance and better understand your creativity. By now, you should know that this stuff is my passion. This is my cause in life. And thank you so much for joining me. Welcome back if you're a regular listener to the show. Hello, if you're new. It's great to have you here. How did you find me? Get in touch, ben@bentalon.com. Always love to hear from the listeners. Let me know what's going on. I would love all of your responses to this episode. This is a hell of a chat. So Nikki Emerton and I met when Nikki came and very kindly spoke at the Friday Drinks meetup here in Salisbury, led by Lewis Plummer, local designer, and myself. We chip in. We recognised the amount of great people in the community that weren't under the same roof ever, or very rarely. Some of them were, and we wanted to pull everyone together and just create some buzz in the room because, let's face it, I think we are all starting to reach a digital fatigue and saturation point with social media and the constant humdrum of the news cycle, which is what we're going to be talking about today with Nikki, among many other things. But Nikki came and did a talk, and she spoke about the amount of thoughts we have in a day and what happens if those thoughts are left to ruminate, to run riot, to lead us down black holes in response to the sheer bombardment of information we face in today's world. And that is precisely what has been happening to me for the last 2 or 3 years. I am finally on the road to some kind of recovery from what I believe has been an anxiety disorder. I have suffered quite a lot, at least on my scale. You know, I never have truly in the past. I'm an overthinker, but I never got to a point where it was a constant problem. But that is where I found myself last year, after 2 years of building up to that, with feeling glum about the state of the world, overthinking, ruminating all the time, and it was somewhat unchecked for about 2 years. Last year, it became even more acute but it was beginning to be checked. I realised there was a problem. I knew I had to check my overthinking and understand anxiety a lot more and cognitive patterns. So that is what I set out on a road to do. And as part of that recovery process, I had this conversation with Nikki Emerton, who spoke some great stuff at our event about that very topic. And I thought, well, there's no more pertinent issue, is there, in our industry? You can talk about AI, you can talk about economy and everything else, but until us sensitive types with empathetic and worrisome brains learn to manage the likes of anxiety and overthinking and the traps that leads us to, then we really can't get to the optimism and the rest of it that we need to get to. So that is the chat I'm having today with Nikki. Thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X. They've been here since day one, representing the global range of amazing illustrators, animators, and everything in between. Check them out now, illustrationx.com, and please do consider supporting the Ukrainian Institute, who you can check out at ui.org.ua, supporting the brave and embattled Ukrainian creative community in this horrific time of war. But that's about it. Let's get into the conversation. Let me know what you've thought of recent episodes. Please do rate, review, subscribe. It massively helps the show to grow, because I do this out of passion. I do it weekly. It's a heavy toll sometimes on me. It's a lot of work, but I love to do it because I want to support you guys and your creativity. It is my life's cause. It is my passion. Get in touch to talk about coaching opportunities. We can do that. I have a smaller session now. I have the pit stop, which is the flagship session. Comes in about 3 hours, and then it's another 3 to 4 hours on my end, writing up the notes of recommendation to really meet you where you are and get you aligned on that path. So I love that session. I'm also now offering a smaller 90-minute session. So get in touch. I want it to be accessible for everyone. It will elevate you where you are. It will help get you back to your story, or even recognize your story if you don't truly know it, and move forward with that as a compass, operating and firing on all cylinders creatively. So get in touch with thecreativecondition.com. But let's get to it. This is my conversation with Nikki Emerton about overthinking and the brain.
So, but it's when imposter syndrome tips over into that second-guessing, self-doubt, self-gaslighting. That's when it's unhelpful.
Yes. When it's constantly, if you're always fighting, you're right. It's a lovely way to stave off complacency and keep yourself accountable, isn't it, if used correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's interesting. It's become a label, and a modern label to kind of resolve, and like it's almost like it's a mental something mental that's holding you back, imposter syndrome. But actually, I think more like you, that it's when it's healthy, it is self-accountability in terms of not being complacent and not sitting on your backside expecting things to suddenly materialise.
Yeah, that's very true,
actually.
Yeah. That's a good way to frame it. I like that. Well, I'd love to hear just a little bit about your background. But actually, let's start with current role. I'd love to hear about the work you're doing today, and then I'd like to kind of hear the sort of the journey, the trajectory to that in a whistle-stop fashion.
Yes, because it has been a journey. So right now, I'm one part of the Mind Body Gut Training Company. That was founded in 2022, and it is all about understanding that your mind, your gut, and your body have to have health in all areas for you to have health in yourself. And you can't have great mental wellness if your gut health is poor, and you can't have great gut health if your mindset is poor, because of the vagus nerve. But also, for some people, they store their emotions in their body. So it's this like almost triadic way of looking at a person as a whole. I teach people to become therapists right from the starting point, so no previous knowledge or experience required. I also help practitioners increase their skill level. So quite often you'll come across a client and you realise that there is more that you could offer them, but you don't have the skills. So that's where we come in. Me personally, I specialise in toxic relationship recovery. So all of the darker side of human nature and what effect that has on people, and how to help individuals rebuild their lives according to what it is for them. So you mentioned earlier, before we started recording about being empathic and liking helping people. Now, if those are your core values, but that has shifted into people pleasing and giving to others at the expense of yourself, it's about boundary setting with yourself and with others. So that, in a nutshell, whistle stop, is what I do right now.
Yeah, and maybe an obvious question, but you're passionate about it.
Oh yes, it's not a job, and I think it's cliche, but when you find, and I think it's relatable to the Ikigai. I don't know if you've ever come across the Ikigai model.
No, I haven't.
It's the Japanese meaning of purpose of life, and it's a Venn diagram, and it's what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs more of.
Fantastic.
And when you find something that hits every single aspect of those 4 sections, that's your ikigai. And when you've found that, that means you wake up with motivation and passion every single day. Very rarely is your job a chore. Of course, there are mundane things that nobody wants to do, but in general, you're excited, and you show up as your best version of yourself pretty much all the time.
I love that, because there's a tendency when you're passionate about what you do and when your work is for the greater good to feel bad about asking for money for that. And I've had to work on that. I grew up in a working class family. Relative scarcity. We weren't breadline poor. We had a lot, but we had a lot of love in the family. We had a lot of psychological safety. And actually the scarcity, I'm very thankful for it now, because I found my passion through a very limited horizon of things and got deeply passionate about those things, which led me to where I am today. But I have to work day in, day out now. Now that I'm coaching and I'm doing something that is helping people on a mental health level, on a motivation level, and a wellness level, more so than my illustration ever did. I've had to work against that, because I'm not charging a lot at this point. I'm charging a reasonable amount. For freelancers, I know it feels like a lot. Therefore, I really have to fight, not just going, I'll do it for a bit less, or, and really kind of cutting myself off. I would change capitalism tomorrow if I could. Many of us would, but we can't.
Yeah.
Therefore, we have to make a living,
we do.
So that diagram is really interesting because it brings that into it, and I love that, and I haven't come across that before.
And I think the person that I went through, and I've had to do an awful lot of work on myself at charging what I do charge now. I've come out the other side, and I would arguably say I'm one of the more expensive therapists in the area. And that's taken me on probably the vast majority of the 9 years that I've been in business to get to the point where I have been okay with charging that amount of money, because like you, it's like I want to give. I'm a pleaser.
Yeah.
I am a helper. I do want to help people get the best, very best from what they can out of their lives. But equally, when you spend years and years and years not being able to, or working your socks off just to pay your bills, you have to go, why am I doing this?
You do, because if you don't, and I'm sure you're a better position to tell me about this, but I think that you end up in your own scarcity mindset. You end up more, maybe more anxious, perhaps more bitter. There's a whole raft of negative emotions that can perhaps come on from being underpaid or not earning what you need to earn, and therefore you can't give the best to your clients.
Absolutely. In the world that we're in, if we have our shared areas of expertise in coaching, only 10% of people make it past their first year, and out of those 10%, only 10% of those make it past their 5th year.
Yeah.
So it requires a unique kind of person to be able to create a successful business in the coaching industry, because it is saturated and it is unregulated and so on and so forth. And part of that is to understand what you're offering to your clients and why you are unique, why you can get results where perhaps other people can't. And then understanding that is your worth, and then charging your worth is a really difficult journey. It's hard.
Yeah.
And every now and again, that little gremlin, even though I believe I have kind of like addressed the gremlin of charging my worth, every now and again, that little gremlin pops his head up and goes, are you sure?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Every time I sort of quote to someone, whether it's verbally or over an email, it's there, and it's kind of, I have to battle it, and I've gotten better at it. Certainly when it comes to my illustration, having got 18 years experience now and knowing the value of what that brings to clients. But even that took a few years at the start to get there. Yeah. And I know for a fact that the people in my industry will be listening to this will be sort of nodding along, and especially in a cost of living crisis when we're all exposed to so much negative news and kind of, scaremongering. It's it's a very real risk that you panic, go the other way, and then end up not able to earn anywhere. So
I was very thankful to be surrounded by some fellow coaches and mentors who helped address those issues around not charging your worth. And it was their pragmatism, I guess, and rationalisation and logical thinking that if cost of living is going up 14%, why aren't your services going up 14%?
Yeah.
Not to say that you're going to charge another 14%, but actually in order for you to maintain your current lifestyle, which means you can continue offering your services, your unique propositions, and able to help the clients that you service in the best way that you can, why are you not increasing your charges? Because otherwise you are squeezing yourself out of business.
Yeah.
And who's that going to help?
Yeah.
So it's really good to be surrounded by people who had that kind of logical, rational thinking that kind of keeps you grounded and helps you shut the gremlin out.
Yeah, it's essential. Yeah, you know, and it is, you know, there was a brilliant video a few years ago, and it was made by a Canadian design or advertising agency, I forget which, but they made a video to address that kind of, you know, how historically artists will, you know, do the work for free. Or anyway, they did this video where they went to a number of other services, like going into a coffee shop and asking for the coffee for free. And I remember there was this kind of Italian-American guy who was he's like, what's wrong with you? Get out of here! Like, and he, you know, losing his mind, and all these other people's reactions to I've been asked to do it for free or for less it highlighted how silly we are for you know, casting that upon our craft.
Yeah, and another thought that's just popped into my head. I had the same thinking about mates rates when I went into business for myself and started looking at mates rates at a completely different level. If you are a mate, don't ask for it for less, because that's not being a mate.
No.
That's doing the total opposite.
That's true. That's a very good point, yeah.
Very early on in running my own business, if someone said, oh, I'll do it for mates rates, I said, no, you won't. And they were like shocked. I said, if I'm your mate, I'm going to pay you what you're worth.
Yeah.
And if I think that's 20% less than what you're charging, then I'm not your mate. And ditch me.
Yeah.
And so, and vice versa. If people say to me, oh, can you do it mates rates? It's like, really? Do you understand what you're asking here?
Yeah.
Because your mates rate means you're taking away my ability to not only look after my own family, but also run a successful business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I get it if it's like cash in hand and you're not paying VAT on it.
Yeah,
That's
or if it's someone that you're likely to need their services and you'll acknowledge that and help one another, that's different. That's kind
it's
of
pro bono.
cooperation.
That's totally different. That's not undermining each other's worth. That's just going, okay, you have something that is of value to me and I have something that's of value to you. Yeah. So we're swapping services.
Yeah.
So I did that a lot in the early days and tend not to do that so much. Because again, you kind of, if your services are valued at different prices, like where do you draw the line? And now you're having awkward conversations with somebody you class as your friend.
Yeah. It becomes very grey then, doesn't it? Yeah. So what led you to doing the work that you do today?
So that's probably the interesting story, and I'll do my best to do a whistle stops tour. In 2009, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is chronic widespread pain throughout with no medical cause. ME or CFS, I've got both on my medical records. I also had a history of anxiety and depression, so mainly a social anxiety more than anything else. And my body basically drew a halt. It stopped functioning. So we're talking about not being able to get out of bed in the morning, not being able to care for the 4 children. I still haven't had at the time their ages. 2 of them were under the age of 3. Not being able to work, so I was dismissed from the NHS because I hadn't worked. They were absolutely brilliant and kept me on much longer than they needed to try and address where I was at. But despite having intense chronic fatigue service, which was sited in Bath, but there was a centre in Salisbury at the time, going to Wessex Rehabilitation as well for a period of 2 weeks to desensitise myself to the pain, having a huge amount of medication. It's absolutely insane the amount of medication I was on at the time. Nothing seemed to work. I'm not the sort of person to sit on my laurels. I'm an overachiever, which I didn't know at the time then. But I think it was when my daughter, who was 14 years old at the time, came into my bedroom to ask me if I had taken my medication, did I need a drink or anything. I thought, she's not becoming my carer over my dead body. And that's what mobilised me to then go to the internet, not recommending Google. Usually it doesn't work for you, but in this case it did. And I found a brain retraining programme, which my partner said, what have you got to lose? Because I didn't have anything to lose. I'd lost my job, I'd lost my health, and couldn't really function at the time. So I went on this brain retraining programme, and in less than 3 days I pretty much got rid of all of the fatigue, all of the pain. Wow. And it literally turned my life around. And that's because it taught me how destructive my internal dialogue was. How I was talking to myself was destroying me from the inside out. So that's what kind of set me on a journey. It wasn't appropriate for me to retrain at that time, so that was in like early 2010. I was getting my health back. My kids were like 3 and 4 years old, and going up to London to retrain just wasn't, and the older 2 were 13 and 14. So I waited until the younger two were 9 and 10. So a little bit more independent, it was a little bit easier. And then I started retraining in 2016.
Wow, that's quite the story. So, with that speed of turnaround, tell me about that and how do we best frame it, this conversation? So, to skip forward a little bit, I wanted to talk to you predominantly about thinking and about thoughts and about the kind of world we're in today, the information overload, the craziness, the negativity that we're all exposed to. I sense and have sensed and have felt for some time now almost a social sickness. That's the level, I think, of overthinking and the news we're bombarded with. People walking around almost, I don't want to say terrified, maybe that's a bit strong, but under this weight of thought,
Yes.
this cloud. Is that in any way linked to where you were?
Absolutely. So one of the recommendations, the training that I went on is 12 to 16 hours. I say 12 to 16 hours. I later became a practitioner. I delivered the same training program that got me well for a number of years. And trying to condense 16 hours into like 30 seconds is quite difficult. But essentially your brain behaves like a muscle. The more you exercise it in a certain way, the stronger it becomes. So in my particular case, having a father who is a perfectionist with high levels of unachievable expectations on myself and on himself, and having a mum who definitely had a lot of broken thinking around being a victim mentality, blaming others for her own situation and manipulating situations to her own advantage, left me with a really unhelpful set of thinking patterns, which then just continued throughout my teenage years into my adulthood. And the more I did it, the better I got at it, which then creates a cycle of depression, because if you are a perfectionist, then you set yourself unbelievably high expectations which are unattainable, so therefore you're a failure. So your internal dialogue is how useless you are, how rubbish you are, how could anybody love you, want you, you're never good enough. You beat yourself up with a very, very spiky stick. And then the manipulation, victim mentality, why things happen to me, also buys into the depression that I suffered multiple times over my adulthood. And then the fear of judgment, again fear of failure, then creates anxiety. What do people think of me? So that kind of sums up in a nutshell. Where you're talking about overthinking and where we're at the moment, the saturation of news and beauty media, the unrealistic expectations of TikTok and Instagram. I mean, there's more to this than I'm stating, and I'm not picking any individual aspect. But if you watch the news daily or several times a day, like a lot of people do, it pops up on your mobile phone. It's in adverts on channels which are not the main channels. There's death, destruction, unrest, things to make you anxious, which you can't do anything about. Now, when you cannot do anything about a situation that you are flooding your neurology with, which is creating an emotional response that's negative on your neurology and your body, your system, that makes you feel disempowered, helpless and hopeless. And the helpless, hopeless, worthless trap is one of the most difficult traps to get out of in terms of your inner psychological conversations. So what this brain retraining program did was basically teach you all about that and teach you how to stop it in its tracks. Now, that's not something we are usually taught as young people in school, how to take agency and ownership of your own thinking.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's very much conformity to tick certain boxes because it's, we're trying to educate the nation essentially. And so I have a modicum of sympathy for that. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole today of talking about the things that could be better in education. It's something I continue to go back to on the show. But that's fascinating because they're exactly that, the things you can't do anything about. Doesn't mean they're not troubling, but it does mean you have to find mechanisms to think something better, doesn't it? And this is something that I'm finally starting to get a handle on after maybe 2 or 3 years, particularly in my case, environmental anxiety with the climate and things. As a parent especially, that's been amplified, not just by the fatigue of being a parent, but also by concern over being a parent and having to be responsible for these young people I brought into the world. That's been a major issue. I think it's slowly beginning to acknowledge that actually can do something about it, but not in the overt sense that I wanted to. That was the problem. I wanted to be on every protest. I was signing every petition. What I didn't realise was happening is that this very sensitive, empathetic brain of mine was absorbing so much damaging imagery and headlines, even from the best intended people. Emails from Greenpeace, for example, would come, but because they're fighting for your attention like everybody else, they have to get more extreme in the ways that they do that. And that, even though I was looking to do good, was just damaging me. So I've had to sort of step back from all of that and pick my battles. And one turning point for me that I'm trying to come back to in this current moment was recognising that actually this cause, my life cause, which is helping people to tap into that inner magic so that they can create and make better lives for themselves, is that not a good cause? That's what the realisation I arrived at was, hang on, what are you doing for a large percentage of your job that you're trying to monetize more, to do more of right now? It's that. Creativity is going to be needed for any solution, for any big problem in the world.
Absolutely.
So if that's your little market stall in a vast array of traders, let's say, over there might be climate scientists who can more overtly affect the situation. But we're going to need a much broader spread than that, because this is about social psychology and about optimism, about rebellious optimism. The realisation that this had value, that I can pick a lane and have this one singular cause, that changed a lot for me, because I realised that I was contributing and had been all along. Even just in making my kids nature aware, in raising them to be optimistic, to learn not to be anxious so that I can hand that to my kids maybe at the age of 11, let's say, just to pick a number out of the air, as opposed to 42 when I've had to learn it the hard way. It's kind of like, so that's where I'm at, and it's like, and it's not easy. There's days where I fall back into that trap of anxiety, but I'm getting out of it a bit quicker each time now, because I'm using meditation, I'm using better thinking. But as you said, what I'm realising now is the physiological and the brain, the neuroplasticity side of this is real. So actually, I'll be sitting there feeling good, and I'll feel that little anxious surge and go, whoa, what was that? So I'm fighting the habit at the moment, and we're trying to retrain the brain in a longer term sense. Don't know where I'm going with that in terms of a question.
Well, it is training your brain is a lifelong thing. It's not a destination. So if you've ever created a neuro pathway towards anxiety, then it's easy for you to access it. The important thing is you recognise and put a roadblock up. If you think about your brain, very oversimplified, as a network of superhighways and A roads and B roads, and so what you want to do is to make the motorway of anxiety a B road that's hardly ever gone down. It's full of potholes, and you turn to go down it. You think, don't want to go down there, and you take a different route. And a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, and what you mentioned, your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So the things that you conjure in your mind or you expose yourself to, your internal system doesn't know the difference between whether it's real or whether it's just pictorial. And if you are empathic or highly sensitive or affected by your environment, I would urge you to be very mindful about what you consume. And I did a big talk about in terms of what you consume is not just what you eat, it's all of your senses. And in my teaching, I cover the 8 senses, not the usual 5. So most people will understand VACOG, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory. But then you've got vestibular, proprioception and interoception. And that's because not only am I a highly sensitive person, and again, it took me to my mid-40s before I realised that. Had I been taught that when I was a child, probably a lot of my life would have been very, very different. I walked into a service at St Thomas's the other weekend when they were Light Up Alive, and I hadn't kind of clocked because I was helping somebody else at the time. I sat down and it's like, I'm sad. Why am I sad? I have nothing to be sad about, but it wasn't my sadness, it was the sadness of the room that I was connecting to. And once you realise what is yours and isn't yours, if you're a highly sensitive person or empathic, that also helps you to detach from those things which aren't genuinely yours, but you have to be aware of it in the first place. And mindfulness, coming back to your senses, is the first step for you to learn what is yours and isn't yours.
That's absolutely right. And I grew up with a mum who was always very interested in this stuff, and he's maybe even more sensitive than me. And she talked about that, being a sponge and picking up, vibes is maybe a terrible word for it, but so our hometown at the moment where I'm from in Keighley is was a mill town, was a very thriving mill town a few generations ago. It's now like a lot of smaller towns where shops are closing down. There's local tensions of various kinds, So there is a tangible fear in the air around the town. And she picks up on it and will feel down about that. But thankfully she's very mindful about, she'll meditate, she'll close off and protect herself from that, and has taught me to do that gradually over the years. So I think it's a very real thing. And how can it not be when you think that, I don't know the numbers behind this, but I read recently, I think it was in Your Brain on Art, book by Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross, that 95% of what goes on in the brain we're unaware of. Is that, do you
about that, the figures vary between 80 and 95%.
But when you just think of that, think of what we're taking in and is affecting the way we feel and the way we think, that before we, like you said, without even knowing that, if you can even become aware of the possibility that it's not yours, then that's that's a big shift, isn't it?
It is, yeah. In context, you process about 24 billion bits of information every day. So yes, your brain does filter, it does delete, it does distort.
Yeah.
And if you've ever walked up and down a supermarket aisle looking for a product and it's right in front of your face, that's the brain's ability to delete, distort and edit the information that you're processing, because it can't possibly process all of that information. And that kind of neatly swings us back to anxiety. What happens then is that your amygdala is being hijacked and you are hyper-focusing on things that you perceive to be endangering, not necessarily life-threatening to you, but endangering your well-being. And you delete and distort all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And then the more you do that, the better you get at it, until your only focus is, and your version of reality is, the world is scary. Or certain situations are scary, or anything to do with health is scary, or anything to do with going out and socialising is scary, but actually it's not. It's your brain's ability to filter out the necessary information, the important information that it believes it needs to filter out, and disregard all the other stuff, so that becomes your distorted version of reality.
Your story is really empowering in the sense that, even myself in the last few days, I've had many candid conversations with friends while I've been going through this period of feeling too much anxiety. That's been really helpful, because it's helped me to kind of speak it out loud and understand what's going on. But even in those conversations, I've sort of been saying, this feels like it might be a long road to retrain my brain, kind of thing. But your story gives me hope that doesn't necessarily need to be so, but it's about acknowledging and understanding what's going on first, and then, like you say, using the right tools for you. I love the motorways and air roads vehicle for that there. That's really great. What were the sort of big shifting steps for you? Like, how did you tackle that first of all in your story? What were the kind of mental models that you used to have such a quick breakthrough? And also, what are some kind of starting point mental models that you will help your clients with today to get past a situation such as anxiety or overthinking or whatever a trap might be?
Sure. So in terms of the brain retraining program that I did, there was a very set number of steps. And the first thing is notice. Notice that your thinking or your emotions are not helpful. So this isn't about right or wrong, because that's the wrong way to look at it. I know I've just used the word wrong. But it's about, because all emotions are valid. Brené Brown talks about over 80 different emotions. Being human is all about having those emotions. But if they're unhelpful and they're on repeat and they're keeping you stuck, then they're the motor highways that you really want to put a roadblock on. And essentially what it does is, awareness is one thing, then choice. A lot of people don't realise that they do have a choice about how they think, because the brain muscle of anxiety or depression or helplessness or overthinking, whatever muscle they've inadvertently, because you have to remember, nobody intends to do this. Nobody intends to create anxiety. Nobody intends to create depression. And I'm using the word create very mindfully. The other aspect is most people think that being anxious is a thing, a noun. It's not. It's a verb. We do it, and we stop doing it at some point, because you're not anxious all the time. Otherwise, you would not survive, because you wouldn't sleep, you wouldn't eat, you wouldn't drink, so on and so forth. And I think understanding that aspect, although difficult for some people, is essential. Is a verb to allow you to have agency, not blame. Is another thing, is not blame yourself for unintentionally, unconsciously creating any unhelpful thinking pattern, no matter what it is. So awareness, choice, and then it's changing the narrative, not only in your mind, but also in your body. So that's when mindfulness and breathing comes in. So the combination of understanding, education, awareness, agency and responsibility and choice, and then changing the way that you feel and the way that you're thinking there and then, and practicing it over and over and over again. Because if you think you have about 70,000 thoughts a day, what percentage of those are unhelpful? Now, if you're suffering from any long-term chronic conditions such as anxiety or depression, you bet your bottom dollar it's going to be well over 70% of your thoughts are going to be unhelpful. So it's catching every single thought. You won't do it straight off.
Yeah.
You'll do the most significant ones, the most powerful ones first. And then as time goes on, and if you draw upon Atomic Habits, which is a really great book if you're looking to change your thinking, it is that doing one thing at a time. Significant thought that's really keeping you stuck. Become aware of it. Have a choice. Stop it. Revert back to your senses. So the skills and strategies and tools that you can implement, so that you then feel differently in the moment. Is the key to making lasting change. And how you do that has different ways. There's lots of different programs out there. There's lots of different ways that I teach people as well. But it's have that, and then making that a habit, so then that becomes your unconscious thinking. So that even if the anxiety gremlin monster, or however you describe it, pops in, you have an automatic response to it, which will go something like this, and it'll be unconscious, so you won't notice it. In terms of the 95% of thoughts you don't really notice you're having, it becomes unconscious that you notice it, you stop it, you change it, and carry on.
Yeah.
And you're not even consciously aware that you're doing that. So then all of those unhelpful thoughts that you used to have, so that's where I am now, or the anxiety or the depression or the chronic pain or the chronic fatigue is a thing of the past, and it will never, ever come back, because I know that if that motorway opens up a little gap in the roadblock I put up, I will shut it down.
Yeah, that's amazing. So just to go back to your story, that was then the physical suffering that you had
100%.
were entirely brought on by your thoughts.
Yes,
Wow.
100%.
That's incredible, because I've tasted the tiniest slither percentage of that recently. Just to say things, things like I will. Actually, this morning was the first morning in a while that I woke up feeling really pumped and excited and a head full of solutions and positive things about what I'm doing. And that felt amazing to get back there, but it felt amazing because I know that it's not just a sort of random day that's fallen in between anxious days. It's actually been a result of doing the work that you've described there. It's recognising actually the control over things like breathing that can, and in those moments, going from feeling a real surge of anxiety and feeling like the walls are closing in to going, no, I've learned this tool now, I can challenge this, and just sitting down for a moment and doing, let's say, 2 minutes of deep breathing, then into gratitude thoughts, and feeling that rising optimism again coming out the other side, going, I just did that, I did that for myself, and I changed that, and that's felt amazing. Those moments, I think that groundwork this morning was the kind of a manifestation of starting to work at it more and more.
Yes.
And it's the first morning where I haven't woke up with a fear thought. Like, oh my God, like the climate, or when's the money going to run out? Despite the fact that 18 years the money hasn't run out. Not to say that it can. I know things change. You have to keep working at that as business. But really, there's no real evidence for that. And I've again through CBT practices, which I know that is something you have also in your work. I found that amazing. The kind of I've got this little app on my phone called Thought Court. So if I've got a busy day and something unhelpful comes in and I know this is something I can save, it's almost like people schedule worrying, don't they, sometimes?
Yeah.
And kind of have a window to sit down and to actually actively worry so that they can challenge their thoughts. That's been great too.
Yeah. The key is as long as you challenge and change them, because if you just make time for worrying, going back to
of course.
the brain is like a muscle, the more you exercise it in a certain way, the better it gets. And I think CBT is a brilliant tool. You have to be able to catch thoughts and have responsibility and agency without blame first, and be able to rationalise, because CBT works on very much the 10% of the rational conscious mind, whereas I personally would say that the vast majority of people are still needing to action on their unconscious mind. It depends how rational and logical you are as a person. It depends how far along the journey you are in terms of, but CBT is a great tool once you have that capacity and ability to change your neurophysiology. If you try using CBT when you haven't yet got to that point, you invariably end up just triggering yourself even more.
Yes, because
which is an
it's
interesting
theory only.
Yeah, it's an interesting stuckness that some people get into. And it's finding, the reason I'm saying that is every tool out there exists because it has worked for somebody. And the thing that you need to do is to find the tools that work for you.
Yeah.
So you create your own little toolbox of the things that work for you. And if breathing works for you, brilliant. If it doesn't, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If CBT works for you, brilliant. If it doesn't, that's fine. Keep going until you find those tools in your toolbox that work for you. And the next stage is to remember to use them.
Yes.
Because a lot of people will start feeling better and then go, oh, I don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
But that's not to say there's nothing stopping you driving down that motorway again with a roadblock, straight through the roadblock. And when times are challenging, when you're under duress or stress, you can find yourself driving down a road that you really don't want to. And we've all done that.
Yeah.
Autopilot. And we've gone, why am I driving this direction?
Yeah.
I'm not even going the direction I wanted to. And that's in real life. And our brains can do exactly the same.
Yeah.
So the key is once you've established a really good way of being the gatekeeper of your own thinking, is then to remember to use it, because inevitably as human beings we are going to find ourselves dipping into the past way of thinking. So on that terms, I know I have the capacity to create pain in my body when there's no need to do that.
Yeah.
And especially when the chips are down and life is difficult and struggle, I know that about myself, so I will work extra hard to make sure that I maintain my mental and physical and emotional state.
Yeah, and to kind of, it's probably a terrible analogy to use for this, but I always remember, I'm a big sports fan and I take a lot of inspiration from sports and sports coaches, and I remember, someone once saying that the importance of when a team is kind of at the peak of their powers, winning the trophies, etc., etc., that's when it's most important to sign the next generation of talent, to bring the next youth players through, because the moment you rest on those laurels, then before you know it, someone else is doing the groundwork, and then that team gets taken over. I hope you understand where I'm going with that. With that metaphor, but it's that importance, isn't it, of even when times are good and you're feeling amazing, to still acknowledge the time for reflection, for inner work, to actually check in on yourself almost and police those thoughts. That's something you'd agree with.
Absolutely, and I will tell my clients to practice the strategies, the skills, the tools that allow them to create wellness in all aspects of their being when they don't need it. So when they do need it, it's easy.
Yeah.
Because, for example, to put your analogy, which is a great analogy, into practice, if somebody is in the midst of having a panic attack, telling them to calm down or to breathe is likely to escalate them. Unless they have the tools already in place that they've practiced enough that it's almost unconscious and automatic. If it was automatic, they would have remedied the panic attack before it escalated into a panic attack. They'd have managed and regulated their emotions before it got that far. But if you don't do the work when you're calm, when you're open to positive changes, when you're not calm, you won't draw upon those resources unless you have practiced them so much that your brain now maps that as a reliable resource to emotionally regulate yourself. So practice when you don't need it. So when you do need it, it's easy.
Yeah, so it almost becomes a way of life then, doesn't it? Like there's one tool that I use, and I learned it from, I believe it's in the film Stutz on Netflix, with Phil Stutz, a psychotherapist based in Los Angeles, and he was Jonah Hill's psychotherapist. And Jonah acknowledged that he was like a high earner as a Hollywood actor, but wanted to make these tools more available for people recognising a mental health crisis. So made this film about Phil, and one of his tools is the Grateful Flow. I'll get it out there. And it's about the idea that 5 successive, if you really sort of in a meditative sense go into 5 consecutive thoughts of gratitude, that it turns around your sort of feeling in the way. And I found that really, really helpful for myself. But to your point, if I don't practice that when I'm feeling good, when an anxiety spell comes on, quite quickly you freak out and you forget. And it takes, and then it, like you said, rather than de-escalating that quite quickly, you then have to go through the whole rigmarole of the stress response and everything that comes with that, and then it being in your body for the rest of the day and all that. So, yeah, it's and I guess, but when people are sort of in the depths or reach a point where they maybe want to reach out for help and feel like they've lost agency, that can feel like a scary place, can't it? And that idea of getting into the unconscious, which we know from the numbers we've already said is vast. Where do you sort of start to give someone hope about that? And in your own work in particular, do you give people relatively immediate tools to begin to feel like there is an improvement happening? Because that's important, isn't it?
It's a rarity that a client leaves my office on the first session without something that works for them. And it's usually the most simple tools, because if you are in a state of crisis and you don't feel that you can influence your thinking, let alone your feeling, then making it really simple and really easy is key. So I will go through typically 4 or 5 of the standard returning to your senses, and I'll ask them which one has given them the most immediate effect. So they've evidenced it in front of me that they can change their state. A state is a universal way of describing an emotion and feeling, or a way of being. It's neither negative nor positive, it is just a state. So I will already have taught all of my clients at least one way to ground themselves, to centre themselves, to bring themselves back to balance, however they want to describe it, and they've gained evidence that they can. And then I'll send them a recording of my voice going through their preferred process, so that they can then practice that in their own time. And again, with the caveat as, you need to listen to this or practice this when you don't need it, so that when you do need it, it's easy to access it. Because if it's one of the first times you're trying to practice it in the midst of an unhelpful state, you're going to achieve very little, because your instinctive survival will have kicked off, which goes beyond fight, flight, freeze, as vomit, numb, dissociate. So I see a lot of people who are dissociated or numb, and they don't recognise it because it's not one of the standard instinctive responses that they're accustomed to. Fight, flight, freeze just doesn't cut it.
That's interesting.
Somebody will typically numb when they shut down. So fawn is another one that is quite typically talking about. And it's just words to convey a state that a person identifies with. And the key is to find the words that the person identifies with, rather than getting them to fit the mould of the standard fight, flight, freeze. Is expanding that mould so that that person resonates with what the concept that you're trying to explain. So if they resonate more with feeling sick, then their default is likely to be vomit. They're like, okay, I get it now. Every time I feel sick, it's my fight, flight, freeze. But for me, it's vomit more than that. I don't want to run away. I don't want to stand and fight. And I'm not shut down. I literally feel sick. So that's their instinctive response that says that they don't feel safe. And the same with dissociate and numb. There are others. It depends which framework you go to. But it's finding the one that resonates with the client rather than getting the client to fit into the frame.
Yeah. And thinking of it from a sort of neuroplasticity point of view, then, am I right in understanding that, by doing the work when things feel good, it's just doubling down on that habit and retraining the brain in that sense, because otherwise, otherwise it can be quite dispiriting, can't it, when you feel really good and things are good, and then something goes and you're back in that whatever the stage you don't want. That almost feels scary, and then you get the fear about the fear and all these other things that happen. Whereas actually, if on a good day you really kind of double down and continue to do the work, so gratitude when things are already good, rather than feeling good and going, no, I feel good, so I'll just watch telly instead, or I'll do something a bit more mindless. Not that there's anything wrong with that in isolation, but rather than just kind of being on autopilot, it's actually coming back to that work and doing it, so that when the bad moment comes, hopefully it slowly starts to become the minimum, or the minority of what's going on in the thoughts.
I think the easiest way to explain it that I found is, when we think about strength in our physical body, if you say you wanted to, let's use weightlifting. I know it's not the best analogy, but most people understand that if you want to lift heavy weights, if you'd never lifted heavy weights in your entire life and you didn't have a particularly physical job, you wouldn't go into the gym and expect to lift beyond your own body weight. That in order to do that, there are some people who'd naturally be able to do that, I get it. But for most of us, we would have to go to the gym regularly. We'd have to be mindful about what we eat, how much we sleep, and how much we train and exercise, and the way that we train and exercise. And we would seek help and guidance to be able to do that. But consistency would be key. And in order to lift heavy weights, you'd have to consistently train your body to lift heavy weights. Our brain is the same. If you're not consistently working towards a goal of being centred, calm, mindful, however you describe it, if you don't train physically, say you've got to lifting your own body weight and then you don't train for another 6 weeks, and then you're not going to expect to lift the same weight.
Of course not.
So why do we expect our brains to suddenly be able to pick up where we were 6 weeks ago, but we've done no training? We've done no positive action towards maintaining our mental state of health in the same way that we would our physical state of health. So if you think about it like that, then it becomes more easy to understand that every day I probably need to do some kind of training. I'm not going to do like 8 sets of 100-kilo lifts every single day, but what I am going to do is perhaps do some stretching, or perhaps do some other kind of cardiovascular. We're going to do something each and every day to maintain our physical health, if that's our goal. If we want a good state of mental wellness, we need to be doing something every day to maintain that state of wellness. And if we don't, things will slip. And when things slip, we tend not to notice it until we drive down that roadblock we put up years ago, and we go, oh dear, time to get back on to doing the work that needs to be done to maintain our highways in our own mind.
And as you said earlier, you know, when you when you say that every day, sometimes in a busy world we might think, oh God, you know, it's more another thing on my list. But actually, quite quickly, when you do it every day, like anything, it becomes second nature, doesn't it? It just becomes a part of your routine, something you do, and also is then becomes beautifully unconscious. It's something that you becomes, like you said, the brain does remember and can kind of get better at doing that. You know, I've noticed myself recently shutting down, you know, unhelpful thoughts quicker than I used to. Even just, you know, even though it's funny because I'm going to say 3 years has been going on. Not this year's been more acute, but far more hopeful because I'm far more aware this year. So I've been doing the work a lot and noticing the results, which is, whereas the 2 years before that, I think I was very much hijacked by news headlines and the likes without truly realising how inflated those thoughts have become. And that's not to say there's not an issue with the things I was worrying about. Of course there is, we all know that. But my response to them was just completely wanton and everywhere. And so of course I was erratic and all over the place and feeling worried too often. And whereas yes, I still had that this year to a degree, but actually I'm noticing it now. I'm noticing it as something separate from me. It doesn't define me, you know, and that's been a big turning point.
And I'd like the listeners to actually hear your words, that it's something that is happening and it doesn't define you. I think that is really, really important. I've not chosen to watch the news. Occasionally I have, for, where are we, 2025, for 16 years. I've not read beauty magazines for 16 years. Occasionally I will. I'm not saying ever, but it is being very aware about what you're consuming and how it affects you, because I do know there are people who can watch the news several times a day. They're unaffected.
Me too, and at times I envy them.
Yes. Me too. But you're in charge of yourself, and it's your responsibility to create the environment, both externally and internally, of your choosing of how you want to be, irrespective of what anybody else says you should or shouldn't do. A great thing, don't should all over yourself. Really don't. There's something a little bit more ruder, which I'll tell you afterwards when we finish. One of my fellow therapists said last week, and it had me in absolute hysterics. But it's this awareness that you get to choose, and if something's not helpful in terms of, if we recycle back to the Greenpeace and the bigger picture things that you were trying to influence, recognising that was unhelpful in terms of you are trying to deal with a tsunami of events in the world, and one small person against a tsunami is going to feel overwhelming, and you are going to be hypervigilant and overthink the situation while you try and plan every eventuality of something you can't possibly control.
Yes, and catastrophising is a big part of all of this, and that's what I was doing. It was, and it's. So what I was doing would see the scare, you know, let's say scaremongering. I would see the example they'd given to scare me, to get me to take an action. But in my brain, that was happening here and now, or it was next week, which was filling me with horror and you know, all kinds of adrenaline and cortisol, and would leave me weak and unable to do my work. But actually, you know, I go back to what I said earlier about defiant optimism. Part of my cause that I've been doing a lot of journaling through this period of taking action with anxiety, and actually, you know, I kind of got back to myself in a sense that it's like, what is your work here? You know, what is the cause in your life? It's not that you've got to have one big singular cause, but one of the things that has always given me the most pleasure, and I've sort of not stopped doing but neglected a little bit, is shining. I call it shining. It's being joyous and defiantly optimistic in the sense that will inspire other people, so championing other people's creativity, coaching. Just being a part of communities like the Friday drinks that Lewis and I do, that you kindly came and spoke at, bringing communities together like that so people can shine and get inspired together, because the world needs that. If we're going to tackle any major problem, we need optimism and people looking for solutions and feeling empowered in what they're doing. That's what I'd lost. That's what I'd stopped doing. I wasn't shining, and therefore the others around me were noticing this kind of sullen spirit in someone who had always had that shine. That's what I've kind of been brave enough to admit that I need to do for everyone around me, but also for me. And if I can do that, if many of us can do that, then suddenly we have collective energy. Yes. And we're far likely to tackle those insurmountables. And therefore, that image that maybe Greenpeace or whatever news agency had conjured in my mind is less likely in the long run, because I'm contributing to something.
Yes, and it's more of the pebble in a pond analogy rather than the tsunami taking over. And you use the word shine, and I'm trying to find a metaphor to explain that, but I can't. But when you do shine, it has an effect on somebody else, and then that uplifts their energy. And if we go back to science, we're made of atoms. Atoms are 95% empty space, so therefore, as humans, we are energetic. We may not be aware how energetic, or some of us might be overly aware of how energetic we are. But if your energy is on a certain wavelength or certain vibration, then that cannot help but affect those people around you. So as much as positive energy, and I'm not talking about toxic positivity where you're expressing an disingenuous positivity, but when you genuinely are solution focused, grounded, energetically stabilized, emotionally regulated, that energy then shines out from you and then begins to affect other people, and that allows them to change their energy, and it has a knock-on effect. So instead of approaching what I'm hearing from you, instead of approaching things from the big aspect, let's change it from the outside in, you flip that and gone, I'm going to change it from the inside out.
Yes.
And therefore, with very little energy, I can have a positive effect on the greater world than I can do if I try and tackle the world and try and bring it inwards.
Yes, very much. Yeah, you very much nail on the head. And you know, just to bring this to a kind of professional standpoint too, there's a lot of, you know, I had someone describe it as doom porn recently, going back to the general negativity or the fear side of things. And, you know, there's things like artificial intelligence and the economy's not great. There's a lot of factors that are creating a tumultuous market within like illustration and visual communication and I guess a lot more things too. But so what I see is a lot of these articles that are well-meaning about, you know, is it the end of the road for illustration and all this stuff. And again, it goes back to the same effect. I think it doesn't help people to shine.
No.
It actually makes them think it's the end for them, where it's not the case. And I think that we're seeing a lot of change in the world in many things at the moment, including our industry. People, yes, there are great uses of AI, there are clever uses of AI, but ultimately people need human creativity.
They do. And
I think there is a lot of change, and there are going to be a few eggs broken, but I think you can only stay uncracked. That's terrible. If you access that energy and actually, you know, because then you see the opportunities to change and to adapt.
Change is inevitable. Name me one point in time where we have stayed the same.
Yeah, very good point.
and that's what anxiety does.
Yeah.
It kind of keeps you stuck in this altered version of the world, which is completely untrue. Change is inevitable, it's going to happen. And if you try and avoid change, then you're going to come unstuck because you're going against the tide. And if you've ever swum against a tide, you know how tiring that is.
Yeah.
So if you can find the courage and the confidence to be able to go, this is me, this is what I'm good at, this is what my value to me first, because when you subscribe to your own value, that energy then gives off to other people and they buy into your value of yourself, then anything that comes along is not to be seen as a threat, which is what happens when you're in an anxious, unhelpful state of mind. It comes as something to either challenge you, to make changes to the way that you work, to embrace it, or it challenges you to take it on and incorporate it as part of what you do. It's up to you what you choose to do. But understand that change is inevitable, and if you try and go against change, you are going to be anxious.
Yeah, it's very true, and I heard it put fantastically the other day. It's a podcast I come across called The Mindset Mentor, which is great, and he did an episode about how it's important to live your life as if things will work out, that they do work out, because
they do.
That's when you're in that headspace of seeing the change coming and moving with it, like you said, moving with the tide, not against it. And it might sound like a cliche, but I encourage people to listen to the episode because it is great, and it's about that kind of. Then it's not about not feeling suffering or, or any of the emotions that kind of help us to stay on our toes, but it's just about assimilating them and recognizing what it's for and how it's going to help you to shift, as opposed to sticking to one very rigid way of thinking and one way of doing something and just hoping that by some stroke of luck it lasts for the rest of your career. It's not a sustainable model of any career, is it really, or any way of living?
You've got to decide whether you're going to pivot or persevere.
Yeah.
Any given moment.
Yeah.
Are you going to pivot and change, or are you going to persevere?
Yeah. How do you find, how important is community and connection around all of this? Because I find it vital, and when I spend, there's a real, I think technology has handed us as somewhat of an isolation problem in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find, and I know this is a different answer for anyone depending on where they sit on the introversion, extroversion, social anxiety spectrum, but I think that all of us need some kind of nourishing connection as humans. Do you factor that into your work with clients, or is that an individual thing?
I do, and the first thing is, again, it's self-awareness. Introversion, extroversion, independent proximity, collaborative, language and behaviour profiling, which I use quite a lot in my work. I don't label it as that because my clients don't need to know that. But what I'm doing is I'm helping them understand what helps them thrive and flourish, what helps them be the best version of themselves based on their own unique personality. So a lot of the work that I do is about helping them understand themselves. When are they at their best? Yeah. We are designed to be social creatures, but not everybody community-based. So there's lots of different models that you can look up if you're listening to this podcast. There's a human givens model. There's warriors, settlers and nomads. There's disc profiling, insights. There's 16 personalities, Enneagram model. You could go down a whole bunch of frameworks which help you understand. Do you benefit from community? Well, if you start feeling depressed and isolated when you don't have people around you, then probably yes. Are you more independent? Do you only need it occasionally to feel your best? It's an understanding what's important to you. But fundamentally, we are designed to be in a group. And the nuclear family, modern day electronics and people being isolated, although if I was to talk to my two sons who have grown up in that environment where it's mostly online, including a big chunk of their schooling, they've just changed the way community is. They've changed what community means. Whereas before it would have been going down the pub, socialising with your friends, going down the local park, depending on your age and what you did, going to parties, going to groups, going to drama theatre, dance, whatever it is that you did in a community. The terminology community has just changed, so they still find their tribe. They still find those people that have similar interests to them, and they can turn to in terms of conversation and so on and so forth. It's just changed. Yeah. And it's acknowledging how much community do you need to feel at your best. Yeah. Is it a little or is it a lot? Yeah. And then making sure that you create your environment, your weekly schedules, so that you have enough community and connection with other people that helps you fulfill your needs in terms of how much you need for that. It's
funny, isn't it? Because I was thinking to myself yesterday, I thought, there's this sort of, I recognise it's a strange realisation, maybe it's a part of this more self-awareness recently through doing all this work, but I sort of realised, God, I don't, like Laura said to me, when was the last time, you laughed in that kind of uncontrollable, lost it sort of laughing? It's not that I don't do that, I haven't done that, but I thought, that was a very finite question and answered the question, but that must have stuck somewhere, and I sort of started to think, do you know, it's funny, like, we went out quite a lot when I was younger, like you said, generational thing, down the pub every Friday, Saturday kind of thing, and at uni. And what I realised that I missed a little is that kind of weekly release of just sitting around that table, the week's done, you feel good, and then everyone's being silly in it, the raucous laughter and all that. But I get that now with my kids. I get that with my kids rolling around wrestling on the carpet. I get that phone call. It's not that I'm not getting it, but I made the mistake of thinking, I don't have that anymore. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to go and drink 10 pints anymore. Yeah. But like, you have to look for different vehicles as your life evolves, don't you, for getting these things, and it's acknowledging the different ways that community can be sought and attained. And I realise a very lovely version of that is sometimes even just to your point, is just to leave a WhatsApp voice note with a friend who's also a busy dad, and we have these sort of delayed back and forth conversations, but still get the warmth of hearing them, and we still get the laughs through, slightly distance, and there'll come a point where we go, right, let's have a proper call next week, it's been too long, and then we'll jump on a Zoom call or whatever, because we live in different parts of the country. But yeah, there's no right or wrong way to do that, is there? But I think that ultimately we do need to feel sort of not alone and like we're heard somewhat.
I liken it to, we all need to be buoyant in life. And we need to have an awareness of what keeps us buoyant and what sinks us.
Yeah.
And to do more of the stuff that keeps us buoyant and less of the stuff that sinks us. Or if we can't escape the stuff that's sinking us, do more of the stuff that keeps us buoyant.
Yeah.
To find that balance. So if somebody is going through a really tough time, my advice to them would be is prioritise yourself and do more of the things that boost, that lift you, so that you can deal with the stuff that you know is inevitably going to sink you.
Yeah.
Whether that's difficult relationships, whether that is mental unease, whether that's family, whether it's financial, whatever the cause is that's sinking you, have a reliable set of things that you know that will uplift you, like that telephone call to your friend, making a priority rather than delayed WhatsApp notes. Or whether it is taking yourself out of the busy environment because you've done too much peopling. Maybe you're more on the introspective side of the scale. Have an awareness of what it is that serves you and what doesn't serve you. And if you notice there's an imbalance, take time to analyse it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not an analytical thinker, more of a flow state person, which a lot of creative people are.
Yeah.
Is take yourself out of it and go, what's happened in the last week? Why am I not feeling as buoyant as I'd like to? And then identify the things that have sunk you and the things that lift you up.
Creating a data set is quite important, isn't it?
And going, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do that thing which is neutral, because that's almost like sinking anyway. I'm not going to do that just now. I'm going to do this first. So it might be a 5-minute walk around the park. Doesn't need to be long. It might just be 90 seconds. Yeah. All it takes.
That's a great point. I'll give you a little example of mine of that. Is just sometimes as a busy dad, Saturday morning's going to be quite hectic. Martha goes to dance, so on and so on. But actually just with that morning coffee while we're having breakfast, picking up that book that's inspiring me that I'm into, like I'm into a lot of sort of psychology books and neuroscience books at the minute with all this coaching. I love the learning. It's become my driving passion. Just grabbing it, reading 2 paragraphs. It feels good. I've learned something that's interesting. I can tell a story about that later in the day with my wife. Then I can get off and do all my busy work. Not that I'm not taking joy from that, but actually I know that for me I need to just tick that little box that gives me buoyancy, like you said. So yeah.
And that's twofold for you, because not only are you meeting your own needs of a love of learning and inspiring you, but you're also sharing that with other people and lifting them up on an energetic level. Yes,
which again is part of the retraining of my brain, is to start to recognise that no, actually, even if the selfish pleasure is watching, because I got into the trap of thinking, a bit of football fan, so watching Leeds on the weekend, it's like, I started to feel guilty about that because there's a heat wave over in that country, and that's a crazy way of thinking, because you can understand how it happens, and it did happen to me, but actually to see futility in those pleasures because something else is happening that you have no control over is only feeding the problem, as we've discussed. It's it just doubles down, whereas actually maybe you need an idle pleasure that doesn't have any, glamour on it.
I'd say most people do need an idle pleasure.
I think we all do. I think we all need a little escape. I'm encouraging my kids with their Pokemon cards at the minute because that's lovely. It's going to bring them community and shared passions eventually. And if it's never more than that, then what a great result,
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm aware of the time. I'm going to wrap this up now, but one biggish question just to end. So when I work with my coaching clients, I look at their insurmountables, so the things in their life, the monsters, the things they feel they can't slay. So in my case, it was the kind of climate and things. One thing I've had to reckon with recently, maybe this is a midlife thing, I don't know, but it's mortality, and that sort of sense of I'll wake up in the night because I've got that kind of brain and go, oh my God, one day I'm going to be dead, and freak out and have to sort of pull myself back. And it's like, I have friends who never get that and they go, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, oh my God, but I have friends who get it all the time also. But in terms of reckoning with that, and I think it goes back to values and principles, like you said, and sort of driving causes. Really, when it comes down to things like that, I'm ultimately of the mindset, well, I'm here. This is real, Let's do it. Let's feel good about it, because everything else I don't have any control. It goes into the box of don't have any control again, doesn't it? Even though it's scary. But actually, it doesn't take the scariness away. So I think this is another thought thing where I've started to kind of put diversion thoughts in place, to use your road analogy. It's kind of go, okay, the thought will come, the thought will be scary, but then I'll just look at your kids and realise how precious that moment is and throw yourself into that. Is that kind of in keep with an
You've got
approach
the answer,
you would take?
yeah. You've got the answer. Whenever you are trying to control the future or change the past, what you're missing is the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
So most of our thoughts are about the future or the past. Bringing yourself back to the here and now and noticing something which brings you joy, whatever that is, whether it's your children, whether it's the birds singing, whether it's the sounds of the ocean, whether for a lot of people silence. It's one that we dismiss a lot. Bringing yourself back to the here and now, it's guaranteed at some point you are going to die. And yes, the older you get, the more mortality becomes a thing, and that's progressive and developmental. Those people who don't ever experience a question over their mortality probably are better at the here and now.
Yeah.
Than those people who do question mortality, who are spending their time in the future or in the past. It is bringing yourself back to the present moment.
Yeah.
And whether that is noticing, oh, what socks am I wearing today?
Yeah.
It can be really simple, and in fact I would encourage the simpler, the better. There's lots of different techniques. Anything that engages your senses is going to bring yourself back to balance. It's going to reset your nervous system. Mm-hmm. And understand if you have had a scary thought, it's going to affect you for approximately 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So if you can be aware of that.
Oh, that's interesting.
It takes about 20 minutes for your the stress hormones to be dissipated and processed by your body. So if you can understand that, okay, well, I need to be mindful for the next 20 minutes or so, because you don't want the allostatic, the layered effect of, oh my God, thoughts one after the other.
Yeah, of course.
Then you have that increased layered effect, which then takes a little bit more hard work to get back to balance. Mm-hmm. So you've nailed it already. You just bring yourself back to the present moment. Yeah. Even the sound of a ticking clock. Yeah,
that's why the meditation and mindfulness doesn't it? And people say, I forget what the numbers are, and but the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing, there's things you can see, smell, taste,
see,
so on. Well, okay, that's really interesting.
And I use that one a lot. Not necessarily the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I do a slightly simpler one, which is 3 things, closing your eyes, 3 things that you could see in the room if your eyes were open. 3 sounds that you can hear. Yeah. Or if you can't hear anything, because you lose, sounds are quite minimal. Yeah. Really. 3 sounds you'd love to hear. Okay. And 3 things that you can sense. So perhaps where your hands are, or your feet are, or where your body's being supported, or something touching your skin. And then going back to 2. 2 things that are different that you could see if your eyes were open. 2 sounds that are different, or 2 sounds that you'd love to hear that are different. 2 sensations that you notice, and then repeating back to one of each thing. By the time you've done that, your thoughts are pretty still. Yeah, I love that. And again, that you said about the, like in meditation, recently did a guided meditation, and it was about feeling your body go heavier on the bed, and that alone was quite profound to me. Actually, when you lend yourself to that and become really mindful, it's really quite anchoring and brings you into that present. Yeah. Bit difficult if you suffer from chronic pain.
Oh God, yeah. Oh.
So that's about finding the most useful tool for you.
Yes.
And I'd encourage anybody who's listening to this is to have a really varied range of tools that work for you, so that you'll find that, and I liken this to actual real tools. A Swiss Army knife is a brilliant tool, but it's rubbish at hammering a nail in the wall. So have a really varied set of tools in your toolkit that will work in different contexts and different environments and different ways that you're feeling.
And I guess it goes back to the education thing, doesn't it? My sort of bugbears with that, but your approach, and I believe the approach of any good coach, therapist, whatever the role is always about giving themselves to the individual and making sure that every facet of that person's life is taken into account when helping them to seek their own solutions. Yeah. Well, this has been amazing, Nikki. Thank you so much. Where can people connect with you if they want to find out more about your work?
I'm pretty visible online, so if you research Nikki Emerton, you'll find my website, which is nikkiemerton.com.
Fantastic. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome.
I'll share all the links, and cheers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to Nikki Emerton for taking the time to talk to me for today's episode of the Creative Condition podcast. Lots to chew on there, lots for you overthinkers to consider, and I hope it's been as useful as it was for me. I remember leaving that conversation, I'd been feeling okay that morning, a bit back to sorts, but there's been a lot of anxiety since, a lot of quite acute anxiety since for me. And I still refer back to a lot of the things that Nikki talked about, about training the amygdala, changing those thought patterns, avoiding those news channels sometimes. I've been very curatorial about what I take on board now. I certainly don't watch the TV news. I sometimes switch the radio off when the news headlines come on. I curate my news intake in a way that is wholesome from reputed sources. I balance it with the likes of Positive News, which I think is a tremendous source. Subscribe to their magazine too. So I hope it's been of some use. Please do let me know. I would love to hear from you guys. ben@bentalon.com on the email. Message me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, I might be slow if it's the likes of Instagram. I don't check them as much as I used to. I don't actively use them very much at all these days, but I'm always up for a conversation. If you would like to work with me one-to-one on the coaching front, I adore that work. I can help you elevate your creative game, get back to a place where you feel fulfilled, like you are telling your story, doing things on your terms. That's what my coaching is all about. I would love to work with you on the pit stop session. If not, I've got the smaller 90-minute session. Let me know and we can talk about that. What I do is I always get on a Zoom call with prospective clients, or in person if you're close by. I'm in the Southwest in Salisbury, often in London. And we can have a chat, see if we're a good fit. We'll talk about how it works, talk about your situation and make a decision from there. So let me know. I'd love to do that. thecreativecondition.com/coach. Massive thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, illustrationx.com, for all their global range of illustrators and animators. Check out illustrationx.com now. And please do support the Ukrainian Institute, ui.org.ua, to support the creative community in embattled and brave Ukraine. Cheers for listening, guys. It's been fantastic as ever. Cheers to Nikki Emerton again. Have a great week and I'll see you next time.